Good day, everyone. This is Rita Choi, again, founder of Asia HRM. Asia HRM is a human resources community focusing on coaching and leadership. We help organizations build high-performing teams. We are also an advocate for coaching. So we have a coaching platform called Coaching Engage Plus, connecting qualified coaches with their potential clients. We have also developed AI augmented coaching, especially for young generations. If you want to know more, just let us know. As a continuation of an HR Leaders series for Singapore, so this time we are going to talk about disruption-ready leaders, leading through volatility, developing the next generation of disruption-ready leaders. Are you ready to be disruption-ready leaders? And our speaker for today is Kevin Chua, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer of the United World College, Southeast Asia, a mission-led international school widely recognized as a global leader in international education. He was also previously the Chief People Officer of the National University of Singapore, which has been consistently ranked the top 3 universities in Asia Pacific. I understand that Kevin has prepared a deck introducing himself in a more detailed manner, so I'll leave it to him. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Kevin. He's going to walk us through a deck that he has prepared for our session, and after that we'll followed by Q&A. For those who are watching our session today, please say hi to us and also leave your comments and questions in the comment box. Kevin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Thank you, Rita, for inviting me to this platform. It's a privilege for me to be able to share my thoughts here. I was so afraid that you introduced me as an expert or a guru, but I'm thankful that you didn't. I'm not an expert nor a guru. What I'm going to share with you today is really about my observations and my research in this space. So like what Rita said, I will introduce myself a little bit more. So my name is Kevin, and I'm a man wearing many hats. So the way I introduce myself nowadays is that I amplify leaders and their performance, maximizing the impact of their teams. And I do this through the many things I do. I serve on the boards of 2 organizations. I'm a chief HR officer of an international school. In the evenings, I do executive leadership coaching. I speak at events such as this and other events, whether in Singapore or outside Singapore. And I'm also a judge for a number of HR awards. In terms of industries that I have worked in or are involved in, you'll see a long list there, even though my last 2 executive full-time role is in education. I have not been in education for all of my career. In fact, most of my career has been in the biomedical side of things, from medical technology, pharmaceutical, scientific equipment. I did oil and gas. I serve on the board of 2 healthcare organizations, a nursing home and a mental health charity. And my early career was actually in the Singapore public sector. In terms of roles that I've done global roles, one out of Singapore and another really fortunate and blessed to be in the company HQ of my previous company in London, where I did a global role. I did a number of Asia-Pac roles. I've also done Southeast Asia role, and of course a Singapore-based role. And my current role is actually a Singapore-based role. So the list of cities, countries there are also places that I've spent a fairly significant amount of time, either working or studying. So that's about me. As I say, I draw my lessons learned from many of the roles that I play and through many industries that I've been involved in. So business as usual, business as new usual. We talk about disruptions. I would say maybe 5-10 years ago, there was disruption, and it tended to be singular disruption, just one thing. But today's disruption is actually multifold. Many areas of our work environment is being disrupted. I think what adds to the complexity is one disruption impacting another area, disrupting the other area as well. In the area of technology, everyone is talking about Gen AI. What next? I don't know. Before this, blockchain, machine learning, IoT, Internet of Things. These are technological disruption. In the area of cybersecurity, or sometimes not just cyber attacks, which now impacts all organizations, including, I recently read a US hospital was attacked, and basically ransomware was asked of the hospital. As I say, I used to work in a pharmaceutical biomed industry, and one of the fear is that what if our systems get hacked and lives are at risk? People can die because our systems are hacked. But we don't need to talk about hacking. Sometimes a glitch, if you remember about 18 months ago, CrowdStrike in one of their patches disrupted air travel all around the world when airline systems could not do the reservations. Things like that happen. It's normal. Geopolitical risk is also another big disruption. Last year, this time, probably people are talking about tariffs. This year, well, tariffs is still in play, but there's a whole lot of other geopolitics going on, including nationalities that cannot work in the US anymore. Or, if you are based in Europe, what's happening to Greenland? There's a lot of fear, uncertainty. So geopolitical risk has become much greater, geopolitical disruption. And geopolitical disruption has also impacted supply chain. In the past, for many of us who work in the commercial world, we want scale, and we build things in one place so that there's economies of scale. Through the geopolitical disruption of tariffs and all of that, you see all that being disrupted. People moving their supply chain, rejigging, or in COVID, when certain markets were open or certain markets were closed, your supply chain completely disrupted, and impacts in the Singapore context like us, where we are so reliant on food. Food security became a critical issue. It's life or death. Regulatory disruption, where rules are changing. Environmental disruption, we talk about climate change. Again, a couple of years ago, we are all moving towards green. The direction seems clear. How do we get there? Maybe less clear. Today, if you look at the world, very polarized. Those who want to move, say, for example, in the US, who is going back to fossil fuel, dialing back on many of their environmental initiatives, to China, who's pushing on ahead. So if you are a company working in this sort of global environment, what do? You push ahead, you pull back. What do you do? And of course, business model changes. These are not new, happen through over the years, but the business model may be disrupted. But as I said at the start of this particular slide, the disruptions are not new. I think really what's new is it's happening all at the same time. It's one particular sphere impacting another sphere. And before you deal with one, something else happened. And that's the kind of environment we live in now. So, in the past, we talk about VUCA. VUCA has been around for the last 40 years or so, since the Cold War. It's a well-known, understood acronym. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. But today, we are no longer talking about VUCA. We're talking about BANI, brittle, things that look like they are stable and look like strong, but with the tiniest disruption become fragile and shatter suddenly. It impacts people. The anxiety level of employees, are high. It's a constant state of tension because you're on all the time trying to figure out what's happening next, or things are happening rapidly changing. And I can remember during the pandemic time, this I know is 6 years ago, about this time, 6 years ago, we saw what's happening in China, wondering what's going to happen. But day by day, things are happening. And in the early days, in those days, I used to work for medical devices equipment, and our sales force have to go into hospital. My sales force was very anxious. They don't want to go to hospital. And we had goods coming in from China. People are wondering, oh no, is it carrying the virus? Will I get infected by just touching the goods? There's a lot of anxiety. Anxiety today is different in different countries, different issues. And for non-linear, no longer cause and effect. Things are disproportionate. Things are disconnected. Black swans event happening that disrupts everything. And I for incomprehensible. Things don't make sense, even with more data, because things change so rapidly. COVID was an example where every day things seems to be changing. Now perhaps AI, or Gen AI, things are happening constantly. How do we deal with that? So with all of that, my assertion is that a new kind of leader is needed. What worked for us, what worked for leaders in the past, is not going to work for leaders in the future. Really, a different kind of leader is needed. So then what kind of leader is it? In the past, leaders wear cape, they can do everything, they're like Superman, they know everything. But really, going forward, I put there leader as host, not hero. The leader does not have all the answers anymore. The leader has to embrace not knowing, embrace that the team may know more than them. Others may have perspective, knowledge, skills, and here's where diversity comes in, where different people can bring in different views to help build the answer. The ability for leaders to be confident in themselves, to ask the questions and not have answers, to let others in to the decision making. Leaders need to role model being inquisitive, being reflective, being experimental, and to unleash the collective creativity and intelligence. In fact, just last week, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues to say, oh, we need to train the leaders to understand everything about AI. Not wrong, but I push back to say, must the leader know everything? Must the leader be the expert in AI? The leader must know, but ideally, the leader creates an environment where people are willing to experiment, where try, fail, and then we figure out the way to go. Because the leader does not have all the answers, and it's not possible with so many areas that's happening and disrupting at the same time. But, to be a host and not a hero is not easy, because the organizational culture needs to enable that. The leader then, becomes a culture builder to create a culture where people are confident to approach problems, to be curious, to test assumptions, to investigate possibilities, to seek feedback. So in fact, in the same conversation I had with my colleague, I was saying, no, the leader's role is not to know everything, but the leader's role is to enable experimentation. The leader's role is to enable people to try, to fail, and it's okay. We don't punish failure because the person tried to do something new. We want that, actually, because that's going to be the way that we find a path forward. We also need leaders who creates a culture that tolerates ambiguity, that foster collaboration, and then provides the conditions for adaptability. So really, a leader's role is critical in building the culture, and the need to role model the kind of behaviors that, all these are acceptable. Also, context and direction. When we do all of this and people are empowered, at the same time, you want the organization to move in a certain path rather than all over the place. So I find that in my experience, leaders who share context do very well. Where is the industry going? How is our company responding? The leader has a certain perspective, and that is the overview. And that's important for the leader to share with the team, and even the sub-leaders to share with their team, so that they understand where the direction is going. And when they experiment, when they try, it's focused into one particular area, a particular path, rather than all over the place. That's where you can amplify and energize that's where you want to focus the energy. And provide them transparency, tell them what available information there is, and tell them the unknowns. In the past, I remember years ago, this 25 years ago, there's a cascade. The top number one leader tell the number two, and it goes down the chain. Today, actually, that's not quite possible because social media is out there. People, I remember a couple of years ago when there was LinkedIn. The global CEO visited Australia. I found out from LinkedIn first before the official communication on the company's intranet. I even know what the leader was eating because somebody took a photo of his lunch, and he was in Australia, so there was a koala bear. I found out so much more about what my leader was doing in Australia via social media than through the official channel. So there's a need for transparency because people can find out. People can really find out. And finally, the one in white is the EQ to manage the anxiety. Early on, I talked about Pani and the A, being anxious. It's not just the employees are anxious. Leaders themselves are anxious themselves. So as a leader, there's a need to have a deep awareness of your own anxiety. How is it showing up? How are you reacting? What are the triggers? Because if the leader is not able to manage their emotion, it actually, people can see, and people, the next level, will behave in the same way. What about limiting mental models of the leader that prevents the leader from doing certain things? And this is about managing themselves as a leader, but also managing employees. I mean, we talk about authentic leadership, we talk about emphatic leadership, and all these are EQ that the leader must have. So when we talk about all of this, then what do we do? And this is my slide to say this is what we do. It's not that we don't have to help leaders to understand motivation, delegation. All those things are still needed. But if we do all those things and not other things which are here, I think we're missing the beat. And this is where I think, the development of leaders for the next generation would be much more important. These are soft skills. Some are harder than others, as in like hard. So I call it hard soft skills and soft skills. Okay, and I'll start with the bottom one, scenario planning, because things are happening so rapidly and changing so fast with multiple possibility. Scenario planning, contingency planning becomes important. But this is, to me, an easy skill to train because there are frameworks, there are models, and we just need to train our leaders in knowing how to do scenario planning, contingency planning. Because there are multiple versions of the future that might happen. How do you prepare the organization to go for it? And different scenarios with different probability, that's how you do it. The other two are, I call, much softer skills, harder to develop. The first would be managing ambiguity. How do we make decisions in ambiguity where there's limited information? Or even when you get information, it changes from day to day. How do we detect signal from noise? Something happened in my organization a couple of, probably a year back. And, it was under the radar, it was percolating, brewing, and then eventually it blew up. And the thing that we asked ourselves when it blew up was, how is it that we did not pick it up? What signal was coming, even though small signal? How do we know that that's not noise? Not so easy. And now as a leadership team in my organization, we are committed to say, hey, I detect something. What do you think? And we just check with each other. Is this brewing? Will it implode? Really, really difficult. Second thing is emotional intelligence. I talked a little bit about it just now, about managing oneself, how we emotionally regulate ourselves, and all the more, and even more so rather, empathy and support for other people. So I believe that in addition to all the other skills, the leadership development program, these are the critical things that we have to help our leaders develop. Really, really not easy. Maybe scenario planning is a little bit easier than the rest, because you can't send a person for a course on okay, this is emotional intelligence, and I expect after 8 hours, 12, 16 hours, 3 days, 4 days, the person become an expert. It doesn't work that way. Here's where I think that is one mode of learning that can really help leaders, particularly in the softer soft skills. Executive coaching. I consider myself an advocate for executive coaching because I am a coach. I mentioned it earlier, and one of the things that I saw, in my coachees is deep awareness, deep reflection, and then ability to make quantum leaps. I have been very fortunate. I've been coached, as a coachee, not so much as a coach, about 3 times in my career over the 25, 30 years. And each time I think back and wow, I have gained so much because there were personal breakthroughs. What were my underlying assumptions that I questioned and able to break through? So for executive coaching, as I say, leaders come in all sorts of form and shape and strengths and weaknesses, etc. But with coaching, we can actually be very individual leader centric. It's hard to be individually centric in a leadership development program because you run a course over 1 week, 2 weeks. It has to be a standard piece. But with coaching, I find that we can be very bespoke and individualized. And it actually drives deep self-awareness, particularly in the area of managing one's emotions, leading teams, inspiring teams. I find that it's very powerful in that space, even in managing ambiguity. And managing ambiguity actually causes stress on the leader themselves. So the two are interrelated. So what I find is that when there's breakthrough, behavioral and mindset change happen, and leadership become enhanced and amplified. And they in turn can help lead their organization. Today with technology, and Rita mentioned a little bit just now about her platform where it pairs up coach and coachee, there are things such as online coaching. Today I do quite a fair bit of coaching online rather than in person. Well, there are still advantages of in-person coaching, but online coaching allows us to bridge distance. Right? I'll tell you one of the coachees I had. Really quite interesting. He is Ethiopian. He's based in Addis Ababa, capital of Ethiopia. He works for a UN agency, and I'm able to coach him from Singapore. My time evening, his time afternoon, and we can do that. So there are real advantages to online coaching, and I find that in terms of leadership development, this is one of the highest returns on investment. So that's all I have to say. I think you've heard me for quite a while, almost 25 minutes of me talking. This is my LinkedIn profile. If you'd like to connect with me, please feel free to do so. And right now, I would like to invite comments, questions. Feel free to disagree with me. I'm perfectly fine because it adds to my learning. If anybody wants to challenge me, I welcome that because I may learn something new.
Oh, thank you, Kevin, for the very insightful session. I particularly like the part you mentioned about leadership for the hour, right? Okay, so especially you mentioned about host, not hero. So as a leader, we don't need to know everything. You don't need to be an expert of everything, but we need to be let our employees experience it, encourage this kind of transparency, and so on. So I have a question for you. From your experience, what is the biggest shift leaders must make when moving from business as usual to leading in constant disruption?
The biggest shift. I think that's
the
a great question. I don't have a one answer. I think it depends a lot on the leader themselves. My own perspective is that if they are able to, the ability to self-reflect, the ability to reframe problems or reframe issues, and see things from a new perspective. I think that's the biggest breakthrough. Because as leaders, the tendency is that, we become leaders because we did very well. That's how people become leaders. The tendency then is, oh, I know it. I know how to deal with this because I've done it before. But really, what brought us to where we are today may not bring us to where we will be going. So therefore, the need for deep self-reflection, to see things from different perspectives, and to be able to change. I think that's one thing. Related to this, in the past, people talk about assessing leadership development in terms of learning agility, how fast somebody can learn. For sure, I agree. I think an additional point is not just learning agility, it's unlearning agility. How fast can you unlearn? Because if you cannot unlearn, you cannot relearn. And the need to be prepared to unlearn.
I love your concept of unlearn and relearn, right? But share with us some examples or your personal stories on this kind of mindset shift.
Okay, let me think. Unfortunately, all my examples are all recent examples. That's the issue of recency effect. Unlearning. Okay, maybe I'll share one that is not in my organization, but from a coaching context. Yeah, I was coaching a senior person. She works in a family-owned business, and she is a functional expert. So she doesn't run a business unit. She's a function. I remember talking to her, and she said, she was shocked and surprised. The CEO came to her and said, "Would you consider to be a successor for me?" And she was very shocked because she saw herself as a functional person. She did not see herself as a business person. I probed a little bit deeper, and I asked her, in business meeting, do you speak up on business issues? She said, "Oh, but I'm a functional person. I don't speak." But Kevin, when that you ask me this question, whenever I speak up, my business leaders, not just the CEO, my peers, say, "Wow, that's really insightful." I say, "Wow, there you are." So you have what it takes to look at things from a business perspective. You are not just a functional leader. I say, what happened to her was she wears a hat. I'm a functional leader, so I stay in my corner, my space. When she has the courage to speak up, people turn and look at her. I say, for the fact that your CEO asks you, "Would you be a succession candidate for me?" speaks a lot. And through a coaching context, I really have to help her to speak up in a business meeting on a business issue, not her area. Her area, she is very good and she knows exactly what. Yeah, so that's I think an example where through coaching, I can help her unlock her potential to see herself as a business leader, not just as a functional leader.
Wow, Kevin, thanks for sharing with us this story. Earlier, before we start the session, you told me about your job in the education sector, right? And one of the challenges that you mentioned is about making the academic staff to have commercial sense, right? I think it's quite related to what you just mentioned, right? Although your client is only a regional functional head, she has this business mindset. So I think it's very important that no matter in what positions you are at, we need to have business mindset. We need to dance with the business in order to contribute further to an organization. That's very true. Very true. Thank you so much for this wonderful story. Then earlier you mentioned that leadership for the hour. Now we need another type of leader, right? Disruption-ready leader. So what does this kind of leader look like in their real behavior, but not just theory?
Again, I think there is no one size fit all. I don't think there's a profile of a leader because leaders are needed in different organizations with different contexts. What works in an organizational context? Let's say a leader in a startup may not work as a leader in a growth situation or a turnaround situation. But if I were to look at my experience and look across the models, I would think the ability to bring in the immediate team and to allow for diverse views, and at the same time be able to eventually make the call to say, this is where we will go. So the ability to bring in views and the ability to change their mind based on the data that they have to go in a particular direction. I remember a few years ago, I was asked this question. I said, and the question was, in an environment where disruption is so rapid, I have to go back to COVID because I don't think any disruption was as rapid as that, where every day something's happening, every day is changing.
True.
And I said,
Very true.
Where do we have time to consult? And I said, actually, I can share an example from those days. And I remember when things happened, I had 5 of my direct reports. I pulled them into my office and I said, this is happening. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? It took me 5 minutes to consult. And then we move ahead. So and that works for that time. Will it work for AI? No, I think we have a little bit more run time, right? We don't need to make 5-minute decisions. And I'm thankful for that, So back to your question, I think the ability to bring in diverse views, to hear the perspective, and then to make a decision to go forward.
Does it align with your sharing earlier about shared leadership, meaning that since as a leader we don't know everything, right? It's very it's nice to also appreciate the views or comments from our peers, from our subordinates before we make the decisions.
Exactly, and I find that this ability to do that helps you navigate ambiguous environment because everybody has partial data, or data keeps changing. And the person who maybe is really on the ground has the latest set of information that, as a leader, you may not have. So managing ambiguity is a little bit like, the blind man holding the elephant. Everybody sees a little part, but, until we get everybody's view and we put it together, we cannot see the elephant. We see the trunk, we see the leg, we see the ears, we see the tail. Yeah.
Very true, very true. Okay, so collection of wisdom, right, is a very good way for us, for leaders, to make good decisions, especially we don't have sufficient information on hand. Okay,
yes, right.
So Kevin, I have another question, but before I bring up my other questions, for those who are watching our session today, just feel free to put your questions or comments in the comment box. We welcome your questions. Thank you. So what are the most common leadership mistakes you see when organizations face volatility?
I wouldn't say common, but if you ask me, I think and maybe it's because I work in organizations that are very, in a way, you want organization to be data-driven. The flip side of data-driven is we are asking for more and more data and not make decisions. So don't get me wrong, data-driven is needed. But when we go down to the nth degree, and when things are rapidly changing, and when we don't have full set of data, the worst I've seen is what I call analysis paralysis. We're just asking more and more data, but not make the decision. And frankly, once we get to a certain level, it's enough. Just move. Just move and then adjust later. Rather than not make a decision. So that, to me, I think is a strength becoming a weakness. Asking more and more data, trying to come to the nth degree. Actually, you don't need that. You just move. It's enough.
So don't just rely on data, right? And then keep on procrastinating making your decisions.
Yeah, I think if I were to coach the leader, it's the fear of making wrong decisions. And therefore, clinging on to data after data after data. But the fear of making wrong decisions. And the way I coach a leader is, which is worse, to not make a decision or to make the inverted comma wrong decision? Because I think the wrong decision is not to make a decision.
So, Kevin, are you saying that making a wrong decision is better than making no decisions?
Hard for me to generalize. I think there are times that there is a continuum, you know, and we should be data driven. I'm not saying that we don't be data driven, but let's not do it to the extreme. You know, I think we are rarely in a situation where we just have to gut feel and move with no data. Very rare, you know, in our world. And therefore, I still believe that there needs to be some sort of analysis, some sort of data, but let's not be paralyzed by it just because we don't have every single information, every single piece of information that we need to make the decision.
Do you have any stories or example to share with us, especially when it comes to decision makings for leaders?
I do, but I now cannot remember. I remember a conversation I had with a colleague of mine to say, why don't we just make a decision? If I find that if I get this additional piece of data, it's going to take me another, 1 week. And we already know this is the gut where it's going to land. Whether it's here or here, we're going to make the same decision. So just move rather than find where exactly it is. But the context I forget. I remember it was, okay, I know the range, where it's going to land. From past information, data gathering, we know the range. And if it's here or here, we would make the same decision. So why bother trying to come up to where exactly we are? To me, it's a waste of time and resource, and another week gone. And we were not in a situation that things were changing rapidly. So it's not like decisions we make one day is going to be out of date another day.
Yeah, very true, very true. So earlier you mentioned about fear, right? The fear to make wrong decision. Okay, so what role? And you also mentioned about EI, emotional intelligence, which is one of the key sort of skills or traits for disruption-ready leaders. So what role does EI, emotional intelligence, play in managing fear and anxiety within teams during uncertain times?
Very important. I think for the leader, and that's where when I do coaching for leaders, one of the things I ask them is, when you're in the situation, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Close your eyes, go back into that time, and when you're going through that, label the emotions. You can tell me, it's very seldom leaders will say fear. They might say, I'm not sure. They might say uncertain. Again, sometimes they say anxious. I ask them how, what is their physical reaction? Some say, their palms get sweaty, their heartbeat goes faster, or they cannot sleep. They keep thinking about it. I say, what do you think that is? Let's label the emotions. So I think once we can label the emotion, and then let's say they say, actually, I'm anxious. It's okay, let's break it down. What's your anxiety? What's causing this anxiety? And that's when they may say, I'm afraid I make the wrong decision. And then I may ask them, okay, what's the consequence of a wrong decision? And what's the consequence of not making a decision? So I will probe deeper and deeper. That's for a leader. There are times where when leaders come to me and ask me for coaching about managing their teams, and I'll similarly do a similar type coaching conversation to say, okay, why do you think your employee is behaving this way? What can you do as a leader to provide a safe environment? How can you calm the emotions in the room. So that's what I do. For in a lot of my careers, I work in scientific environment, and to talk about emotions is not easy, because they are science based. They like, when you do something, this is happened. When you put a chemical to next chemical, this is exactly what happened. You do it 100 times, that's exactly what happened, and they are uncomfortable to talk about emotions. But that's where I come in and I lead them into those type of conversations to help them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. In fact, it was interesting. I was just, as I say, talking to some colleagues on Friday, and I said that what I like them to be able to do is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And if they're not uncomfortable, they're not learning. Because they are so, if they're comfortable all the time, they are not learning. So we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Very nice. I love it. We need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this is where we grow ourselves, right? If we are too comfortable with current status, we are not growing ourselves. Very true.
Exactly.
Very true. So as a disruption ready leader, we also need to manage ambiguity, and this is where you feel your discomfort.
Yes.
Okay, very nice. Okay, so I would love to have could be the last question before the closing remark. So if you could give one piece of advice to leaders who wants to become truly disruption ready, what would it be and why? One piece of advice.
I would say reflect on your own leadership. Reflect on your own leadership, and are you helping to progress the organization in a world that's disrupting? I've shared some attributes. Reflect on where you are on those attributes. If you have a chance, do a 360. Ask your colleagues, where are you? I think once we are able to reflect on our own leadership, only then do we know in which way can we be better, and how can we grow as leaders. I came across, I was a very young employee once, and I came across a leader who said to me, "Oh, Kevin, I've done this for 25, 30 years. I know what exactly to do." That was 25, 30 years ago. And I think maybe that still works. But today, if a leader comes to me and say that, I'm like, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow is going to be very different from what you have experienced in the last 25, 30 years. And if you think they can use the formula and just repeat the formula, I think you're way wrong. Way, way wrong. Way off track. Because how are we going to thrive? How are we going to flourish? How are we going to be fulfilled in the coming years, decades, will be very different from what it was in the past, which is coming back to, can we unlearn? Can we unlearn?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So we need to reflect, right? I think first and foremost, reflect on where we are, especially share with us the attributes of being a disruption-ready leaders, right? Like decision-making skills, embrace ambiguity, work on your EI, especially on managing oneself, and also be empathetic. Lastly, about the scenario planning, right? And now we are no longer, we are not just in this vocal world, we also have this Bandai, right? Barney, yeah, Barney, yeah. So this is another stage. So that has made us to ponder and also to reflect one more time whether what do we need to learn and also to unlearn. Thank you so much, Kevin, for the insightful session. So any closing remarks for us before we conclude the session?
No, I think I've spoken so much. Thank you, Rita, for inviting me to this platform. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. So let's conclude our session today, and we will see you again next Wednesday. And enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Kevin.